There's a moment in the very first episode of The Twilight Zone that I keep thinking about. In many ways, that first episode establishes the formula for the entire following series. It features a main character who is, unbeknownst to him, already embroiled in a highly unusual situation. It stars a single actor who gives a big, showy performance. There's a twist at the end that recontextualizes what the whole story was about. But in other ways, it stands apart from the series. There is no Rod Serling introduction to this episode, no familiar twinkly theme song, and no eyeball floating through space. There is, in fact, no supernatural element to the whole episode. And 20 minutes into the show, this happens. This might be the most memorable moment of the entire series to me. And yes, I remember Maple Street and Eye of the Beholder, Room for One More, and That's Not Fair. But it's these 3 seconds, this man desperately trying to pass through the looking glass and being violently rejected, that most viscerally stick in my brain. It's the strange fracturing of a fantasy. The entirety of the episode thus far has been this man wandering through an empty town. The restaurants, police stations, and movie theaters are barren. There are hints of life, lit cigarettes and ashtrays, functioning projectors, an ever-present feeling of being watched. But no people, and no explanation of the desolation. At one point, the man remembers he was in the Air Force and thinks, maybe there was a bomb, maybe it killed everyone, maybe it killed him. And then he runs into the mirror and he stumbles outside and begs anyone for help, and then we learn the true shape of his world. The man, Sergeant Mike Ferris, is not in an abandoned town, nor is he dead. For the entire time we've watched him, and for hundreds of hours prior, he has been in a single room, an isolation booth where his entire delusion has been observed by a cohort of uniformed men. This has all been a test, a general explains to a group of reporters, and it was successful. The time spent in the isolation booth, hundreds of hours alone, is what will be required for a trip to the moon. Ferris, despite his mania, proved the ability of humans to last in a room alone. This is the hardest aspect of endurance, a medical officer explains.
You see, we can feed the stomach with concentrates. We can supply microfilm for reading, recreation, even movies of a sort. We can pump oxygen in and waste material out. But there's one thing we can't simulate. That's a very basic need. Man's hunger for companionship. The barrier of loneliness.
This is what's holding us back, he says. The next frontier, we understand, will not be gated by our strength or beauty or intelligence. The future will be held in an empty room. In the opening of the 2019 video game Death Stranding, a lot of things happen. We would be here all day if I went through the Timefall, the BTs, the bridge babies, the beach. The first 40 minutes of the game are a cavalcade of ideas and imagery, all set where most of the game takes place. Wide open, lonely highlands, grass and rolling hills and dark cliffs. But after this opening onslaught, Sam, the protagonist, wakes up in effectively a cell. He's handcuffed to the bed in a windowless room. His new friend, Deadman, tells him that there's a job only Sam can do: deliver a package of medicine to his mother. Sam's mother, the President of the United States. His mother, who is being kept in a location referred to as the isolation ward. Deadman explains all this, and then he glitches. His hologram shimmers. He's not actually there, see? The room is empty. But you're allowed to exit your cell and walk back into open air, provided you agree to the mission. The isolation ward, where you have to deliver the medicine, is not far away. It's actually very close, like maybe 3 blocks. Because the walk is so brief, it's easy to forget how bizarre this environment is, where virtually all of the rest of the game takes place in nature or individual closed-off bunkers. The walk through Central resembles, well, that first episode of the Twilight Zone, actually. It's an empty main street. Like Ferris in the Twilight Zone, Sam can even holler while he walks, touch a button on the controller, and he'll yell, "Hey!" or "I'm Sam!" or "Anyone there?" Usually, you'd yell this in the middle of nowhere. Sometimes, you might actually get a response from a nearby player-built structure. But it feels more apt here, among the empty streets, and it's unnerving to hear nothing but your own echo. That's not even what I want to talk about, though. After your jaunt through the empty streets, you'll arrive at the isolation ward, a building that doesn't seem to live up to its name. What about where I just was, huh? Handcuffed to the bed in a windowless room? This, by contrast, is big and populated. There are hallways and people, and is that the Oval Office? Yes, it is. Sam's mother, Bridget, is the president, and although she's literally on her deathbed, that bed still lies within the sun-dappled curves of America's most famous room. The life support cables hanging from the ceiling present a potent metaphor. Is this the state of America? Its previous symbolism corrupted by the unignorable presence of death? Bridget and Sam argue. She wants to rebuild the country, reconnect. Sam says there's nothing to rebuild.
Bridget, you're the president of jack shit.
Sam, listen to me.
And Bridget then lunges out of bed. Her life support tubes snap, black goo pours out. Sam recoils. Forget the medical horror, forget the attack by a near-dead woman. This is the first time he's been touched by anyone in the entire game. She begs him again to help. She dies, and as she flatlines, it seems the room itself does too. Half the population of the office reveal themselves to be holograms. They simply blink out of existence. The furniture disappears from the walls. The sun disappears from the windows. The windows themselves shudder into a gray void. There was no Oval Office, no last gasp of American ascendancy. The metaphor was much more potent than some simple life support cables. This is the true image of the country. 3 people and a corpse in an empty room. This is a fitting introduction to the future proposed by Death Stranding, a future where connection is both dangerous to attempt and difficult to argue for. Everything has been reconfigured for isolation. Immediately after Bridget dies, Sam is tasked with hauling his mother's body to the crematorium. The massive concrete structure is, predictably, empty. Sam pushes a button and watches her incineration, alone. The reasons for the abandoned surface world in Death Stranding are obvious. The rain causes people to rapidly age. Ghosts of the unresolved dead haunt the landscape. But the total isolation? The fact that most of the people we encounter seem to live on their own underground without any level of community? This is not explained by simply the rain and the BTs. Instead, what Death Stranding implies is a societal fracturing as well, a preponderance of preppers, those who have decided that total seclusion is the only answer to the apocalypse. Sam doesn't try to convince these people to live together. Sam, for the most part, doesn't see any more of these preppers than their hologram. His quest is to connect people by getting them to join the chiral network, essentially, get the whole country on the same Wi-Fi. Death Stranding's thematic relevance was, of course, magnified by its apparent foresight. Just months after the game's 2019 release, the world was changed, not by Timefall or angry ghosts, but a global pandemic. Many found themselves unpleasantly aligned with Sam Porter Bridges, shouldering the burden of a hostile environment to provide everyone else with anything deemed essential. Everyone who could afford to be inessential did the opposite, locked themselves, ourselves, in an individualized bunker connected to the same giant network and went insane. Where is Everybody?, the first episode of The Twilight Zone, debuted 67 years ago on October 2nd, 1959. The subject of its isolation experiment was space travel. 9 years after the episode, nearly all of America would witness something else on TV, a message delivered to them from space, from the astronauts carrying out the Apollo 8 mission. These men were crammed into a command module for over 6 days as they orbited the moon, but they had each other, and they had the entire country on the other side of the radio. The room was small, but it was not empty. The barrier of total isolation has not, as of yet, been a defining aspect of space travel. But 9 years before the debut of The Twilight Zone, another writer envisioned an altogether different kind of empty room. In 1950, Ray Bradbury published a short story in the Saturday Evening Post called The World the Children Made. In the story, a wealthy family lives in an enormously expensive home that does everything for them. The stove makes them dinner, the lights turn on and off automatically, they don't have to tie their own shoes, brush their own teeth, or take their own baths. But the standout feature of the house, one that cost half as much as the rest of it again, is the nursery. A 40-foot by 40-foot empty room covered in crystal walls. That is a single massive screen, super sensitive color film and mental tape, a screen capable of detecting and bringing into reality any wish of its inhabitants. It had made Wonderland for the family's children, and Aladdin and Oz, Pegasus and rainforests and all sorts of delights, but as of late, it's only been showing a single thing. A blistering expanse of grass in southern Africa, with a watering hole, circling vultures, and hungry lions. Bradbury would later retitle the story based on this landscape, The Velt. George and Lydia, the parents, are freaked out by the Velt. It is so realistically rendered that they fear the animals depicted by the crystalline walls, unthinkingly jump at the appearance of lions, despite knowing the whole thing is an illusion. But their deeper concern is the reason this grassland keeps showing up. Their children keep asking for it. Ironically, it is this version of an empty room that is far more commonly deployed in spacefaring science fiction. Most famously, the holodeck in Star Trek functions as a souped-up version of the Velt's nursery, able to generate not just environments, but physically interactive items and people. In Aliens and Prometheus, lodgings afforded to the wealthy on space vessels are equipped with artificially projected terrestrial environments. In Sunshine, the spacecraft's psych officer prescribes struggling crewmates time in the Earth Room, a holographic box that can replicate various scenes from our home planet. All of these are meant to serve a similar purpose: create a literally grounding environment in the void of space, hopefully staving off any Twilight Zone-style hallucinations while locked in a box for months or years. But often, the simulated lushness of these rooms only serves to highlight the opposite. They evoke a sort of double claustrophobia, a smothering facade held inside a vacuum-sealed cell. In many cases, the use of this sort of technology belies not a sensitivity to the human need for natural spaces, but a callous misunderstanding of the depths on which isolation operates. I see these rooms, the peak of their future setting's technical abilities, and think about that medical officer from the Twilight Zone. There's one thing we can't simulate. It's a pretty basic need: man's hunger for companionship, the barrier of loneliness. The opening of Death Stranding 2 doesn't offer as obvious a metaphor as its predecessor when it comes to empty rooms, but they are even more woven into the fabric of the game's reality. At the very beginning, we see that Sam lives way off the map with his child, Lou, in a private bunker disguised with holograms of the things that make the world so horrifying. False timefall rains from the sky, AirSat's BTs reach up harmlessly from the ground. It's sort of an inversion of the Oval Office in one. There, the holograms made a space feel more lived in, more civilized. Now, Sam uses the same technology to completely conceal what is a pretty homey space with baby toys in a kitchen and pictures on the walls. He maintains his isolation. Sam has never enjoyed living near people, but the inside environment is at least real. And even when he leaves his bunker to once again hike across the barren landscape, his temporary shelters allow him to bring elements of home with him. You can set any picture you've taken as the wallpaper for the entire room. Most players, only having pictures of Lou, will position the baby's face as their entire wall. Fragile will text you pictures of her and Lou spending time together. They can even virtually visit you, a hologram, yes, but real people expressing real emotion. And then, well, spoilers for Chapter 1 of Death Stranding 2, and then Lou dies. Sam loses his child. And instantly, all those cute texts and pictures and wallpapers are recontextualized, no longer reminders of home, but reminders of loss. Lou's face wallpapered on the side of your shelter becomes as alienating as a projection of a forest on a spaceship, a cruel memory of what he cannot reach. The pictures and toys that litter his home bunker compound the feeling of emptiness. Afterwards, Sam abandons what had been his home for another room, a windowless bunk aboard the DHV Magellan, one that only shows the outside world through a grainy camera feed. Throughout its marketing, the tagline for Death Stranding 2 was, "Should we have connected?" Seeing this before the game's release, I was sure I knew what it meant. After all, if the first game had preceded the pandemic isolation, this sequel was being developed with knowledge of that desperate time. For years, human connection could be literally deadly, and more relevant to Death Stranding 1's shared Wi-Fi theory of connectedness, the internet of COVID accelerated our era's particular strain of connection psychosis. Maybe access to an unfiltered stream of infinite content is not something the human brain was designed for. Perhaps this strain of connection left us all feeling more alone than ever. After playing the game, it's hard to say that this is what Death Stranding 2 is about. The game is a confused amalgamation of ideas, many introduced only to be forgotten hours later. But within all its disparate threads, Death Stranding 2 still manages to paint a picture of a world wrestling with its emptiness. In the first game, Sam's initial interaction with Heartman takes place in his lab, a lushly decorated library full of reminders of pre-apocalyptic art and creation. In typical Kojima fashion, Heartman even pulls his favorite physical media off the walls to show you. As such, in Death Stranding 2, re-finding Heartman is a moment of genuine relief, his presence and his curated space a balm in an unfamiliar land, and after the apparent losses of Deadman and Lou. Heartman no longer lives in the mountains, but he's replicated his environment like he's on a space voyage, a giant screen projecting the peaks of the first game. Or, that's how it seems. At the end of your meeting with Heartman, he announces that he's leaving his new home to join you on your cold gunmetal ship, and as he walks away, everything vanishes like the Oval Office once did. The countless books and Blu-rays and all the rest just fading into non-existence. The metaphor with Bridget and the US's decline was fairly obvious, but how are we supposed to read this? Optimistically, it could be reassuring that Heartman can bring the place that he's comfortable in anywhere, that he can make his home wherever he needs to, but I can't help but read it more cynically, that Heartman has aestheticized himself, the visual impression of his room now more important than anything contained in it. His library is just part of the Heartman brand, same as his new heart-shaped sunglasses. It's superficial. It's literally an inch deep. The same goes for Heartman's hot spring, which Sam can bathe in even after Heartman's moved out. The spring is warm and soothing and naturally occurring, and yet it is completely enclosed by a massive screen, one that displays an image of exactly what's outside. If we stepped out of this room, we would see this mountain, But this place, one of the few locations in the game where Sam is allowed to truly relax, is just another empty room, pretending to contain the freedom that lies just outside. It's in these spaces that I most wonder about that early tagline for Death Stranding 2, "Should we have connected?" I assumed that the danger implicit in the question would come from others, but intentionally or not, Death Stranding 2 communicates something else. That the promise of an infinite world of possibility can warp our perception until all of that infinite world fits within 4 sealed walls. But the modern artwork most consciously in dialogue with the empty room is not set in an alternate world or the far reaches of space. It is Bo Burnham's 2021 film, Inside. Like Death Stranding, it has been positioned as a defining piece of pandemic art. Also, like Death Stranding, it does not explicitly mention the pandemic a single time. Inside is a comedy ? Special, with Burnham's particular mix of music, stand-up, and other stuff. For longtime fans of Burnham, the difficulty of classifying the thing isn't a surprise. His previous specials, What and Make Happy, also ended with similarly genre-subverting pieces of performance art. But even amongst Burnham's oeuvre, Inside stands out for obvious reasons. Most notably, that the entirety of it was seemingly written, rehearsed, filmed, and edited alone within a one-room guest house. The claustrophobia is an integral part of the special. Burnham frames himself drowning in AV equipment, cords and tripods and lenses, the room filling up with the literal and metaphorical cost of the project. Much of the conversation around the special's release centered on the reality, or lack thereof, depicted. Burnham could just leave, you know? He's not actually stuck in that room. He has a big house. He's fine. It is understandable, though frustrating to me, that people would focus on this. The special itself is consciously pushing you to wonder how much of it is staged, and if staged and real are actually mutually exclusive. But I think the project of Inside, what it's pursuing, makes as much, if not more, sense when viewed outside the strict lens of COVID. Repeatedly throughout the special, Burnham projects images of nature onto the blank wall of his room. He's blinded by artificial sunlight, his shadow is cast onto a sky full of clouds, he sings under the moon. Perhaps most memorably, he performs That Funny Feeling, the most melancholic piece of the film, in a dark room backlit by the artificial silhouettes of trees. Before we even see Burnham, we see the simulated firelight projected onto him. In many ways, the transformation of the room is one of the most impressive parts of Inside. Every 5 minutes, we're seeing it lit and shot in a new way. And yet, it can never be anything more than the room. Burnham's most striking tableaus are punctured by that reality. Even in his most perfect compositions, the image is broken up by a wall-mounted air conditioner. The special is not about a literal inability to leave a room. The special is about the fear that the world has become the room, that everything is being reduced and smoothed over and brought to us immediately available at the cost of being completely hollow. Why doesn't Burnham leave the room? Because no matter if we have a bigger house or not, none of us are leaving the room. The world is now made of these empty rooms, simulated memories taking the place of people, the whole world at your fingertips, the ocean at your door. The single most striking image in the special is Burnham sitting, looking at the wall he so often projects nature on, and instead of trees or clouds or the moon, it's himself. His earliest performances on YouTube, a teenager in a room with a keyboard and a bed. It's easy to feel the question, has he ever been out of the room? Does this represent his whole life? Is this where he's meant to be? Well, look who's inside again. Do Inside's most staged-seeming moments break the reality of the thing? Yes, of course, that's the point. This, a full tilt sprint into the mirror. The facade breaks, we watch the facade break, but we can't answer what's behind it. There's nothing beyond the looking glass. Ray Bradbury's The Veldt ends in an unforgettably enigmatic way. Frightened by their children's fixation on the death-filled grassland, George and Lydia decide to pull the plug on everything, on their whole house. The automatic shoe shiners stop shining, the self-cooking stoves stop cooking, and of course the nursery, with its immersive crystalline walls, goes dark. The house was full of dead bodies, Bradbury writes. It felt like a mechanical cemetery. The children lose it, flinging themselves onto the furniture and weeping. "I wish you were dead," their son Peter screams. And because George and Lydia are weak, or because they love their children, or because they don't know how to love their children, they turn on the nursery one more time. Running throughout the story are a number of themes. There is the question of what good parenting really means. Does wanting the best for your children mean providing them with the most frictionless life? There is an obvious and uncomfortable fear of the Dark Continent, Africa reduced to a place of death and violence. Why not a little variety, George asks. Sweden, or Denmark, or China. And then there is the question of where danger might come from. When George and Lydia walk back into the nursery to retrieve their children, they're greeted with the familiar sight of the Veldt, but the room is empty. The door swings closed and locks behind them. From behind the door, they can hear their son Peter speaking, not to them, but to the empty room. "Don't let them switch off the nursery and the house," he says. And George and Lydia whirl around to see the lions approaching off the grassland, the empty room now full of menace. They scream. Consumption by the room is always a threat in these stories. The idea that you will, sooner or later, relinquish the you brought into the space. The room will determine who you were and who you can be, the shape of your world and the shape of you inside of it. Every room becomes a mouth. But on my most recent return to the Veldt, I was struck by something else. I kept thinking about what access to the room, access to everything, does to desire itself. Yes, it is disturbing that the children keep returning to one particular place, a Veldt with the scavengers and predators and carrion, but running throughout the story is another question. What do the children really want? What does the room allow them to want? Before his demise, George asks his son why he doesn't want to learn to paint. His son responds, "I don't want to do anything but look and listen and smell. What else is there to do?" And I wonder if this is the true way the empty room will consume us, not the annihilation of the body, but the annihilation of desire, the closing off of the ability to dream beyond it. Everything aestheticized, nothing real. A shuttering of ourselves and what we dare to imagine. 5 months before publishing The Veldt, Bradbury wrote a different story about what could very well be the same house. In There Will Come Soft Rains, he describes a self-cooking oven, a self-cleaning hallway, living rooms that automatically set up bridge tables, and bedrooms that automatically read poetry. The house even features a nursery with crystalline walls, behind which animals scurry on parched grass below a warm, endless sky. There is no hitch in its programming, no glitch in its system, except that the house is uninhabited. It stands alone amidst a city of rubble, a ruin that glows radioactive at night. Its former residents form ash silhouettes on its west side. But the empty rooms of the house have no need of input from people. In the kitchen, a voice speaks to no one. Today is August 4th, 2026.